Hello System Masters and Mistresses, Master System Master here for another video. Today it's going to be about something not a lot of people talk about, and these videos on my channel don't have a lot of success, but I don't care. I like talking about it, so that's what I'm doing tonight. And that's about Stadia. Stadia is not doing pretty good right now, and more people are opening their eyes. Among them we have the Nerf Report. He's a Stadia super fan. He's a good guy. He's not a bad guy. We've had a few heated discussions in the past, but it always stayed respectful. So I appreciate when that can be that way. We can disagree on things as long as it stays respectful. And nothing wrong in being a super fan either. I'm a Sonic and Sega super fan. You know, a lot of us are fans of something. So that's perfectly fine. So Nerf Report, if you want to check this, man, it's really nothing against you. On the contrary, I hope that this video comes supporting you. Yeah, so what he's been doing with his new video is talking about the major problem of Stadia. And after he did that, and for his constructive criticism, he got ostracized by members of the Stadia community, and that's really sad. That's really sad that fanboys can't accept criticism, and that's fanboys of all platforms. I do accept criticism of Sega. I criticize Sonic Origins, and I will continue to do so, for example. And so that's fine. You have to be constructive and criticize the company that you love. Otherwise, they will start just eating you over and just not being consumer friendly anymore. So we're gonna listen to his video, and before we do that, we're gonna pour this beer of the day here, Carolina Brewery Sky Blue Kirsch, brewed in North and South Carolina. I don't know where exactly. So we're gonna listen to him and have that beer. All right.
Stadia has a problem.
Are you listening?
You know what? That might seem like a pretty harsh statement, so let me just reframe that real quick. When Google Stadia was first announced, I was one of those that was skeptical at first. The idea of streaming video games over the internet at the same quality as locally based hardware was honestly a hard concept for me to understand. But when I finally got my hands on Stadia and I was able to try out Destiny 2 and it felt just like I was playing on the PlayStation, I had a realization. This is going to change everything. When other platforms were touting teraflops, Stadia was delivering 0 installs, no waiting around for patches or updates, faster load times, 0 storage concerns, and the freedom to play your game on any.
So let me say quickly that I was not as excited as he was, but I was still a little bit enthusiastic because me too, I like sometimes the convenience. I buy a lot of my games digital. I know it's a blasphemy in this community sometimes, but I like having my 8 terabyte hard drives on my Xbox and just having almost all of the games installed, or just booting up something on xCloud or on Amazon Luna. I pay it for every month. So I am not a Google Stadia hater or cloud gaming hater whatsoever. On the contrary, I think it has some potential when well done. And that's what we're going to talk about here later. Let's continue listening.
Screen that you wanted. While Sony and Microsoft debuted their next generation consoles, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, Stadia was busy ushering in the next generation of gaming. And to go back to the beginning of this video and talk about the problem, one of the most apparent problems with Stadia is that the technology works. Google has proven that if you have sufficient internet, playing games on Stadia is awesome. In fact, if you were to ask any.
So there I would say, yes, it works when you're in the right conditions. But me, I've always had some lag, some latency. It's never been super fluid like playing natively on a console. So maybe he doesn't feel that, but I do feel it. And when my internet is not so, although I have a gigabit internet even here in the house, it's not always great. But I will say this is not the issue. The technology works. I agree with that. It works. This is why I still continue to play on Luna and on xCloud. So let's continue.
player who has experienced Stadia. I mean, when they go back to playing a game on a traditional locally based console, you have to wait for like installs or updates, or you have to do the whole, oh, I gotta uninstall this game to play this one. It just, the simple word is it sucks.
Agreed.
And probably the biggest problem of Stadia working is that not enough developers are embracing it to truly make it the only console that you have to own. Because somewhere along the line, game announcements started to come, and Stadia, for the most part, was ignored. Guardians of the Galaxy launched a cloud version of the game on Nintendo. Games like Dying Light 2, Kingdom Hearts, Elden Ring, Grid Legends, WWE 2K22, Tiny Tina's Wonderland, Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, MLB The Show, and NBA 2K22 all were announced or released with no mention of Google Stadia. And honestly, the surprising part about that is most of those games were from developers who
And so last year I was talking about that the lineup this year will not be the 100 games that they promised, and even that was a low amount. And I said they might not be reaching the 100 games the way it's going. I was talking about that last year. I had a discussion with him and Brian here.
previously brought their games to Stadia. However, a key point to remember is that in the beginning, to make up for low player counts, Stadia paid large sums of money to help bring those games to the cloud gaming platform. And now that the money has dried up due to either deprioritization or just the closing of Stadia Games and Entertainment, those of us hoping to see the next WWE or NBA game, we're just out of luck. Because the sad fact is, without money, Stadia is just Stadia. And unfortunately, in this situation, a lot of Stadia's initial strategy is working against them. Take Rockstar's parent company, Take-Two. Stadia reportedly paid $10 million to bring Red Dead Redemption 2 to Stadia, which means even if the game doesn't establish a large player base, Google's initial payday justified the time invested. And you see, this is where it comes down to the cost versus benefit. Without Stadia fronting the bill, the cost to port a game to Stadia now rides on how many copies the game will sell. And sadly, this is kind of a situation where Google opened Pandora's box, because with a smaller player base, it might be hard to justify the initial cost of bringing your game to Stadia. And with Stadia no longer fronting the cost of porting, we end up in this weird hamster wheel of, will the game come to Stadia or will it not? And granted, when I say small player base, I don't even know how big Stadia's player base is. No one actually knows. Like, I for one have nearly 1,000 friends on Google Stadia, and at any given moment, there's about 40 to 60 people online. Another estimate you could use would be the Elden Ring petition, where over 2,000 people have signed to bring Elden Ring to Stadia, or you could use the Stadia Destiny 2 player count, which right now is averaging around 5,000 players a day. Granted,
I will start by saying 2,000 signatures on a petition is nothing. It's nothing. But, I mean, it's something, but it's not much.
I think that all of those numbers are wildly low compared to what the true active Stadia player base is. In fact, a recent Business Insider article suggested that Stadia missed their initial goal of 1 million players, and the cloud gaming platform is hovering around 750,000 players. But again, none of this has been officially confirmed by Stadia, so really it's just speculation. But if it were true, it definitely would explain why so few developers are looking to embrace Stadia. Leading us to another part of the problem. So far in 2022, Stadia has added 18 new games. Let's take a second and let that sink in. We are nearly 5 months into 2022, and we have received 18 new games. It has been 117 days, which means Stadia has been launching a brand new game roughly every 6 days. And this is where most of the diehard Stadia supporters will point.
And that's not much, guys, because every 6 days you have a lot of indie games on there. You don't have a lot of AAA games. You barely have anything except from Ubisoft that's still supporting Stadia. So that's really not much, all right?
Point out that typically Stadia has a slow start to the year, which is kind of correct, because in 2020, by this time, Stadia added 18 new games. However, in 2021, Stadia nearly doubled that number by adding 43 new games to the platform during this same time period, which you would think that going into year 3 as a platform and you've built all these relationships and partnerships, Stadia would be building upon that number, not going backwards. games. Plus, that number becomes even more concerning when you compare Stadia's 18 games for 2022 to other gaming platforms, like Xbox, who has launched nearly 149 new games this year, PlayStation, who has launched 253, and Nintendo, who launched an absurd 462 new games so far this year. And just for a quick clarification, those numbers come from Metacritic's new game release list. I painfully counted each one of those, so if it's off by a couple numbers, my bad. But the point is, Stadia only launching 18 new games so far in 2022 is kind of concerning. Now, granted, Google has already said that in 2022 they plan on launching 100 plus games for their player base. But even if that happens, and Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox stay on this same path, Xbox will have launched 250 games, PlayStation will be at 506, and Nintendo will have launched nearly 1,000 games, when Stadia has just received one.
So 100, you have to think that every year they've announced a large amount of games, and as far as I know, they never reached it. It was often double. They announced double what they really got. So if they say 100 games, they will probably have 50. And Brian, if you're watching this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember the past few years, Stadia was saying, "Oh, we'll have that many," and they had half of it at the end of the year, I believe. So, and the way it's going with 18 games right now, it's probably heading to 50 at the end of the year, my opinion.
100. And while so far in 2022, Stadia players have received games like World War Z and Life is Strange, with titles like Five Nights at Freddy's, Security Breach, Overcooked All You Can Eat, and City Skylines arriving in the upcoming months, we've also seen the beginning of shovelware and mobile titles begin to creep into the Stadia library. And the absence of larger games is slightly understandable when you have major publishers looking for either a large player base or a payday. Currently, Stadia is offering neither of them. But then on the flip side, you have Sony and Microsoft, who are buying up every major publisher possible. So the market for willing publishers to launch games on Stadia is only becoming slimmer and slimmer, making you wonder, what kind of future is Stadia going to have? Like right now, one of the largest publishing partners that Stadia has is Ubisoft. And there are already reports of them being bought out by a major company as well. So we could see Ubisoft be part of PlayStation or Ubisoft be part of Xbox, and those games no longer being a part of Stadia. And if Google were to lose Ubisoft, I mean, my God, this platform would look drastically different. But moving on from new games, even the topic of older games and long-term support only feeds into Stadia's problem. Stadia, unfortunately, has a problem with long-term developer support, with developers either not continuing to update the Stadia game with patches to address game-breaking bugs, or developers not adding the latest DLC expansions for Stadia players because it was never part of the plan. And if the games do get updated for Stadia, it's usually months after other platforms receive their update. In fact, right now on the Stadia Reddit page, there are a group of players who are categorizing every game and documenting which games have failed to receive the latest patch, or if it's missing DLC content entirely. Which, mazel tov to you all for doing this, but the point is, this should not be a thing 3 years into Google Stadia.
No, it should not be a thing, but it is a thing because it costs a lot of money to make these patches, and they can make the same patch for all of the platforms except Stadia. Why? And I've been saying this, Brian, since day one, and nobody was believing me. Everybody was blowing me off, saying it was not a big deal, it was not a big deal, it was not a big deal. But I've been saying since day one, if you have to port Windows code to Unix code, or Linux, whatever you want to call it, it's Unix. It's costly. It's costly, and unless the devs have a very good incentive to do that, they're not going to do it. So since day one, this platform needed Google's support 100% and 110% to be successful. It needed AAA first-party studios that they closed, most of them in Canada. They needed those. They needed to go and buy their player base at first by giving money to big publishers, and they did that in the beginning. like you mentioned for Red Dead Redemption, and continue doing so until they have a big player base enough that it can sustain itself with its own income, and you can distribute that to the devs and to your first party studios. But now you do not have that income because the player base is too small and the games are too costly to port and too costly to support. And that's the big problem that's been there since day one, Bryant, that I have been trying to tell you and the others. And I was called a hater, I was called a lot of things. But as you can see, I am not a hater because I love my Luna. I love it. There's all the Sonic games coming on there. Plenty of games. I made another video about it, mentioning all of the games that I love on this platform. It's not expensive, the subscription, and you have so much bang for your buck on this. And I understand some people hate cloud gaming, and that's a whole different story. But if you like cloud gaming, Bryant, Luna, and I know you do videos about this too, I know you like it, but Luna is the right business model. And one of the reasons is it's Windows code, it's not Unix like Google. And Google really wanted that because they own, it's open source, but everything's on Android, everything's Unix code for them. So they wanted to stay like that. But Amazon was smarter. Amazon uses what everybody uses. So let's continue.
The fact that developers are launching games on Stadia and saying, well, yeah, Jimmy, it is broken, but judging by the small player base, we'll get around to fixing it when we can, is ridiculous. Why would I trust any games on the platform if they're just going to be ridden with bugs? The sad fact is, 3 years in and we are struggling to see AAA games, or really any games, come to the platform. Long-term developer support is almost nil. Stadia Games and Entertainment is officially dead. And all of this is happening when other cloud gaming platforms and other gaming platforms are doubling down on cloud gaming. And what makes that suck even more is Stadia's tech is so freaking good. Like, the majority of my frustration is surrounding the fact that I want to use Stadia.
Well, the tech is good, but it's not good for the devs. It's good for the end user. But as you can see, it's good for, okay, that it works in your hands, but then it doesn't work when you need a patch or DLC. Because they won't support it because it costs too much. So it's good up to a certain point. It could work with the right amount of support. Yes, absolutely. It could work. You're right on that. But yeah, it's frustrating because they're going down the rabbit hole now, and it's going to be impossible to come out of it unless they would turn around and all of a sudden spend billions of dollars on this platform, which you and I both know that it's not going to happen. I'm sorry to say this, man. I'm sorry. I know how much you love the platform.
Stadia more, and I can't, which sucks. And look, I am a firm believer that the first step in addressing a problem is first admitting that a problem exists. Stadia has a problem. And as a founder and as a fan of the platform, I hope they can fix it. Or, I don't know, maybe Elon Musk will come and buy Stadia. Hey, thanks again for checking.
The problem is nobody's going to buy Stadia, man, because it's owned by Google. Google's not going to sell that, and nobody wants to work with Unix code. That's the reality. So these servers, like I've been saying for 2 years now, well, more and more. In the beginning, I was more positive, but I've been saying for a while, these servers, once the racks, once their data center is obsolete, they will shut down service then. Right now, they probably make enough money to just sustain those servers, and what they don't use, they rent it to other companies, they white label it. So right now they're fine with that. They're just gonna keep it on life support. They're not losing any money. I don't think they're losing any money with it. But once it's obsolete, they're not going to invest more funds in this. They're not. And until that day happens, it might be 3 years from now. My guess would be it might stay 3 or 4 years on life support. And when they have to invest money to have brand new servers, they're not going to do it. They're not. So That's just my opinion on this. But again, Nerf Report, he's a good guy. Nothing against him. So if you want to check him out, subscribe to his channel. He's worth it. Plus, like I said, he does also Luna content and other cloud gaming news. So a good guy. We had some disagreement in the past, but he's a good guy. So there you go, Brent. I hope you don't take anything personally again. And as a matter of fact, I hope understands that I'm supporting him, and I really appreciate that he could turn around like this and admit that Google has a problem, Stadia has a problem, and if there's any chance for the problem to be fixed, the community has to come out and go at Google and ask them to answer the tough questions. When the people raise up and go against these companies, it often works. You've seen it many times when there's boycotts, when there's backlash and unity, things change. But if we don't say anything, things do not change. So if there is one little bit of chance that it might, he's doing the right thing here. And some people, the fanboys, I think the majority of the community even agrees with him, but the fanboys do not. So that's sad. So Brian, don't listen to them. You're doing the right thing here. You can be a fan and have constructive criticism, man. So there you go. That's it for me tonight. I hope you guys have a good evening. And remember to master systems. Bye, guys.